Franco Cavaleri coming to you today with another episode of Potential Within. And we're going to talk today to Garry Lineham of Human Garage. Gary's an amazing human being. I've known him for a long time, since, I guess, more formally.
Since 2016,
Yeah.
but it goes back 30 years.
30 years when we
Yeah.
met first.
Yeah.
And then suddenly started working together, not suddenly, in 2016. But he's had an amazing evolution in healthcare, revolutionizing different methodologies of healthcare, chiropractics, fascial maneuvers. We're going to talk a little bit about fascial maneuvers. Just an innovator in the healthcare system. Garry, tell us a little bit about your entry into this fascial maneuvers and your mechanism of healthcare.
Sure. I mean, I think it comes from, just like you, necessity. So like you were in pain, you had an issue you needed to solve, and you found a way to solve it. So same thing with me. I was in pain my whole life, and I'd gone through care, spent a couple $1 million trying to fix it, and wasn't getting the answers that I wanted. And eventually I just had to take things into my own hands. So in 2010, when I was at the peak of my dysfunction, I became a practitioner. Well, I entered into the business of hiring practitioners through a partner I worked with, and alongside learning and educating alongside the practitioners, and then became one as a result of it. I think at the end of it, it's just necessity is what drives invention. And like yourself, I had something I needed to solve, and I didn't feel good in my body. I was trying to farm the responsibility of that to practitioners and disciplines. And at the end of it, I needed to do it myself. So after 10 years of clinical, of running the Human Garage Clinic with 52 practitioners, during the pandemic.
And that was in Los Angeles, Venice, California.
That was, yeah.
Yeah.
And then that's where we
reintroduced. Yeah.
Reintroduced. And then after that, it was from there. It was coming back up into Vancouver, and during the pandemic, just playing around with these ideas and concepts that we had in the clinic. When we were in clinic, we weren't able to apply a lot of the ideas or concepts because we're working every day. So we got to take some time away. We got a time out like everybody else in the world. And that 2 years of the time out allowed us to refine these self-care techniques, which now are all over the world.
Yeah, I find this evolution amazing, because in Los Angeles, you were isolated to the clinic. And I remember coming in there and then first meeting you, and I mean, I'd known that I'd met you earlier, but it was quite remarkable to see you had chiropractors, MDs, and different disciplines working together to treat health holistically. It was amazing. And now, what's interesting is you've taken that model and you're modular and remote. And every time I look at what you guys are doing, you're in a different city.
Yeah.
And the cool thing was, I have to say, it was very impressive to have joined you guys in Texas a while back, because I got to see everything in motion, and the following that you guys have accrued is unbelievable. You think, like, I know in business in general, if you have a great product, it may take time to gain a following, but it's not a slippery slope.
Right.
Because every person that comes on has an experience that's amazing, and so you're not losing a customer every time you gain one. But with a product that is not functional and not viable, it's that slippery slope. So you don't really gain the momentum that you want. You're always catching up because you're losing customers as you build. For you, every time I come to one of your events, it's doubled in size.
They get bigger,
I'm like, what? It's amazing. And so you guys are doing something right about getting your narrative out to the public, but then the narrative and what you do is functional enough to keep people moving with you. And I see some of the same people, whether you're in Texas or whether you're in
it's not just a modality. It's a movement. It's a movement to self-care, but it's more a return to self-exploration. Making it okay for people to question things again, and making it okay for them to try things and have mistakes, and making it okay as a culture for us to learn about ourselves again. There's a lot of things that today, it's practically in the scientific world. If you think about most of the science done on the human body, around performance and around healthcare, it's been done mostly in the last 50 years, predominantly most of it in the last 20 to 30 years. But we have a population that's been getting sicker over the last 30 years. So we're validating our science about the human body on people who are progressively getting sicker, which is which means that the results that we're getting are based upon, or the feedback we're getting is skewed to some way, and it was giving people the ability to actually try things themselves and make it okay for them to experiment. And what we found is that when people are involved, and we found this in clinic, when people were involved in their own treatment, they were successful. When
For
people
sure.
were not involved in their treatment, they were not successful. And that was the one defining thing that determined someone's success. So by making people involved in the entire process of their care and their understanding, people are becoming successful. And that's really what the turn of the movement is.
Yeah, I think, that has a lot to do with, and I talk a lot about mindset and the psychosomatic effect of believing in your program. And, one of the challenges, I was listening to someone speak, and I don't have the research in front of me, but it's epidemiological research with regards to sickness. In 1950, they said between 5 and 7% of the population in North America had chronic illness, and they were talking about chronic inflammatory illness.
Right.
Whereas today, it's estimated somewhere between 55 and 65% of the population has one form of chronic illness.
And I think that's low, actually.
It's unbelievable, and I agree with you, because we have so many pollutants, xenoestrogens, and other things that counter the neutralization of illness in the body, our immune system, and so it's very difficult for the body to adapt as quickly as the environment has changed in the course of human evolution, right? But as you said, today people are looking for alternatives, and that's what has really allowed us as a company, Biologic, to flourish, and you to flourish, because the science is science. But if you're not looking in a direction, that science will never be found.
Correct.
And so we have conventional and complacent scientists and scientific programs that are myopic and working in a box, because that regulatory narrative is trying to keep everybody in a box. But discovery, as I've always said, discovery happens outside the box. You know, and so what you guys have done, I think it's very controversial, because it's outside the box of the common mainstream medicine. But the fact is that mainstream medicine isn't all that it's cut out to be, and we're seeing that now.
Yes.
It's not catching up with the pace that disease is expanding and infecting humanity at.
I think at the core of it, we have to take apart and rip apart the elements of how we talk about it. Disease, the body's not at ease. So if I have fear and I hold that in my body, I'm not at ease. And when I have fear in my body, I fire adrenaline, norepinephrine, cortisol, and as a result, I eat food. That food is not processed properly. So there's waste material in my body, which creates the effect of holding an emotion in the body over a long period of time is that eventually somebody will be able to diagnose that feeling in the body as a sickness. And at the core of it, that's really what it is. Disease is I don't feel good. And we have a lot of people doing things scientifically or taking supplements or programs, and they still don't feel good. They still feel like not at ease at their body.
Yeah.
And what I found is that it came to something really basic, is if you have an ache or a pain, you need to have a way to satiate your body's desire to listen to it. Like the pain is your body saying,
It's a signal.
you need to listen.
Yeah.
And if you don't have
If you don't listen, it just gets worse, and you get a 5-alarm fire.
that's exactly what happens. And you're dealing with it from the scientific side, where you're watching the cytokine storm effectively, which is a cascading series of the body's talking and I'm not listening.
Yeah.
And like you're not in convention. And what I mean by not in convention is that there's a box that the world wants you to be in, and there's a box the world wanted us to be in. Our way was we try to train practitioners. They didn't listen. So we went with the solution to the end user. Now the practitioners are listening.
Yeah.
And that's very much what you've done in your work as well.
And I think, the success you're having in that one-on-one direct contact with the user contributes to the mindset that they need then to get healthy. Because, if they can get the one-on-one communication about an understanding of the mechanism of what you're trying to accomplish, and it's believable. I mean, That's 50%. 50%
Yes.
of the functionality. It's like in science, they say that, and nobody really thinks of it this way, the placebo effect, for instance. Every scientific experiment and clinical trials, you have a placebo program built into it. Why? Because science itself tells us that the right mindset will deliver a functionality towards health. Your body will heal itself. It's designed to do that.
Yes.
And so they have to offset the effects of your mind with the placebo program within the clinical trial. And you know what I'm talking about. I'm just reiterating this just to highlight the fact that science itself recognizes the power of the mind in the placebo program within the clinical trial.
We have 4.5 million studies over 55 years showing that 1/3 of the time it's just what I think, whether it's a surgery or medication, whether a positive thought, which also the same studies show that the negative thought is another 1/3.
For sure.
Which, I'm not a scientist and I'm not a statistician, but that to me, if 1/3 is I believe and 1/3 is I do not believe, that seems to invalidate the third, which means that at the end of it, and this is part of what I was saying, is that when I have a pain in my body, if I have a way to satiate my body, then I don't run away with the crazy thoughts. Like I am sick, I'm going to die, something's happening, I can't believe this. But if I can calm that pain down and bring my body out of stress, then I have a reasonable
window
chance.
of opportunity for healing. Yeah.
And this is what your products have done so well for our community, both clinically and otherwise, is that they take away the inflammation, they take away things like the sugar response and the things that dysregulate the nervous system that make a 2 issue feel like an 8 issue.
Sure.
And it gives the people more space and time.
Yeah.
And, a combination of a movement and a supplement, we're helping people believe themselves back into a cure.
100%, yeah. So we've and on the biologic side, what Gary's referring to is we do a lot of bench work that leads to clinical trial applications. And so we study the pharmacology mainly of inflammation. And here's the thing, when you're talking about blood sugar management, management or treatment of depression and things like that, all these are related to inflammatory activity.
Every one of them.
Every one. The core chemistry of every single disease is inflammation. It doesn't necessarily mean an anti-inflammatory, will treat every single condition, because many conditions are a function of that inflammatory pathway being affected at different points in the pathway. Yet, what we fail to do when we affect that pathway in a way that's positive is really affect or treat the cause of disease.
Yes.
And, when you're talking about emotional disturbances or other things that maybe over long periods of time change your hormonal patterns, which then affect the immune system and cause it to fail for you, that's a different thing. And this is why, I talk a lot about, and what you're saying, mindset. It's like you can't change disease unless your mindset changes.
Yeah.
Unless you change your lifestyle.
Yeah.
Unless you do something different. You can't expect a different result if you're doing the same thing that caused your disease in the first place.
Well, I think this is where people are at. They've been taught that they take a medication or get a surgery to end a disease, but the disease is, first of all, I firmly believe that every disease known to mankind starts emotionally. And there's a dysregulation of emotion. Now, when our emotions are dysregulated, like if you get angry right now, your pH is going to be off balance and your blood sugar is going to be off right away. Now, if you don't have a corrective mechanism, eventually that's going to cause a dysregulation with your ability to adapt to the environment. And then over periods of time, with that same behavior, you're going to have something that we're going to measure that's uncomfortable for you.
Yeah.
And this is, this is why I say that one of the things is to feel emotionally stable. And I'll give you something that came from the clinic. It might be interesting to you. So we would run these subclinical lab panels. So we would run blood and hormones and all this, but we had this one test that would just basically test how hard your organs were working, to summarize it. And before every test, if somebody was going to have a test that looked bad, I would warn them, because the lab would send them the results in the United States to them directly. And it would be all red, and they would freak out, and they'd call me at 2 a.m. So I had a lady that came in. She was overweight. And I said to her, listen, when you get this lab back, you're going to have all these reds and yellows. Don't worry about it. We'll talk. We're going to work our way through it. Anyways, her lab came back 100% green. And I'm like, I called the lab and said, something's wrong with your lab equipment. And so basically, we had tested 20 people that day. We reset all the equipment. We brought everybody back in for testing at my cost, only to find out that every test was exactly the same as it was the previous day. And it took me 2 weeks worth of work, cost me tens of thousands of dollars to do that shutdown because something was wrong. And then I had to come to the answer was, how is this lady that's overweight seemingly the healthiest person that I've ever looked at? And I got to observe her and then 3 other people over the course of 10 years in my clinical practice. And the one thing that I could ascertain from watching her in social situations, she was genuinely the happiest person that I ever met. And at first I thought it was LA happy.
Yeah.
But no, she was legitimately the happy. And I met another one. I had 3 people that were happy. And irrespective of what traditional looking at the body saying they were unhealthy, they were actually, their bodies were performing in a healthy way. And it drove me to think about the fact that how I perceive my environment, and that's perception, how I frame it up, and how my emotions react to that is really what sustains my health over a long period of time.
100%. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's amazing. I'm relating as you're speaking to studies that speak to exercise, because interestingly, exercise affects the body in so many ways, from mood, hormonally, and I talk a little bit about myokines all the time, where as you stress the muscle mass itself, it doesn't matter if it's a bicep, a tricep, or a quad, they release myokines, chemicals that run around the body, fixing things and preparing the body for the load. So it's an adaptive feature, and so we say if you exercise, you're happier. If you exercise, you feel better. And in fact, you can have someone who's obese, and the benefits of exercise start happening way before any weight changes take place.
Yes,
and all of that is about 2 things. One, the mindset's changed. I'm doing something about this now, and I feel better right away. I feel better about myself because I'm doing something.
So if using that from a scientific point, if I have that feeling that I feel better about myself and I take a small action, which isn't even very physical, isn't my body itself then producing that same kind of adaptive reaction?
Exactly. And so I haven't studied that, but I know that there are neurochemicals that do affect the body in a way that's positive when you're thinking positive, right? We've known this from science. I relate it more to the biochemistry that I study, because that's what I study directly. And then what we do is we try to find mechanisms through supplementation where we isolate fractions that are not typically found in your supplements from a herb, and we find out what those fractions do to simulate what exercise might do and activate those myokines for secretion.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. And so, there are happy pills out there, and these are antidepressive agents, but are they causing your body to secrete the beneficial chemicals?
Well, I think that's the difference between satiating the mind and satiating the body. My belief is if you do the right thing for the body, the mind is okay. If you do the right thing only for the mind, eventually the body suffers. And that's what I found in practice. So people who take care of their bodies, who are healthy, who get chemicals out, who exercise, who eat right, stuff like that, and they will generally have a happy mindset. And when they're presented with a stressor, they get to choose, because like a stressor, let's say anxiety and excitement is the same chemical presentation in the human biology. Same thing with joy and sadness. It's your perception that tells you which one's which. And that's why we cry when we're joyful and we cry when we're sad. It's the same chemicals. But my perception going into that stimulus is what tells me how I'm going to respond to it. And then furthermore, if I respond in a joyful way, then I have all more joyful things attaching. If I respond in a sad way, I start to propagate or see and experience sad things. And this is basically what we're talking about. It's our human expression, which is, we've set it down as a vehicle, which is flesh suit. But this flesh suit has a lot of reaction to how we perceive our environment. And if we have the inflammation out, we have the stress out of the body, then we perceive the environment in a non-threatening way. And this is the combination. Fascial Maneuvers, they that what we promote removes 75 to 90% of the biological stress in the first 7 to 10 minutes. I remember the first time you did it up in Lions Bay. You're like, whoa, I'm getting all these effects.
Yeah, I felt warm. I felt just loose.
Right.
Of mind and body. And the interesting thing, we talk about relieving ourselves or releasing the emotional duress that might be, capturing us and preventing full recovery from within, as potential within. But there's the thing outside of us too. When you're in that negative mindset, you fail to recognize opportunity that's positive.
You can't.
Because everything you see is negative that's highlighted around you. You don't see the positive. You see the closed door, not the open door.
Right.
And so it's kind of an exponential effect. The mindset is an exponential thing.
I attribute that to, this is where what we do with the Fascial Maneuvers is we take people out of stress in like 10 to 15 minutes, and then I ask them to think of their greatest problem they had beforehand. And then it seems like they have more space. Well, the same thing happens when we give them Power Kirk, which is the product you make, or fascial release. It's the exact same experience. They describe it as, I have more space between me and the problem. And the way people describe I see the brain as, the job of the brain is to narrate the experiences of the body. So I have an experience and the brain tells me, is it good or bad? Do I like it? Do I not? Is this something is it positive or negative? And that brain can be tricked over time through repetitive stress over time. It can start to see the world consistently through that negative pattern.
Sure.
And what I've noticed is that when we take a supplement, like one of the ones you've created, like Power Kirk 30, it all of a sudden, the inflammatory jump or the response to that stimulus, if it's inflamed,
It's not as impulsive.
it's negative.
Yeah.
And if it's not, I have more space to respond. If I have more space to respond, then I choose a positive response.
It's interesting the way you put it. You have more space, because I've got a similar way of thinking. When I feel like I'm stressed and there's a lot of moving parts coming at me, you're running a business or in life with the family, and I find that, I'm okay if there's 2 or 3, I might get a little bit amped up. As soon as the 4th or 5th one come up, I'm just like, okay,
You need space.
I need my space. I'm going to look from here. And it's almost a mechanical way for me to disengage the emotion, because now everything's coming at me, and now I'm going to become a little bit cognitive and get rid of the emotion. Because the emotion, if you are impulsive, I tend to be high strung. So I've learned that this is a thing I need to do, because things come at me and I'm like, what?
That's your coping mechanism.
That's my, it has been.
Yeah.
But I've learned to, okay, back off, wait, and watch. And when you talk about the Power Kirk doing that, it is relieving inflammation throughout the body, whether it's physical or the inflammation that's physically in the brain affecting how your brain thinks.
Yeah, it's relieving it's targeting the fascial tissue or the connective tissue, which is what makes everything up. We're made. I mean, our organs, our nerves, our bones. Like, if we stand on our foot too long and we put pressure on it, water develops, and then over time it calcifies and the bone grows. The bone, the fascia, is actually growing bone, and it's constantly growing. And so when you're giving your body that space, that time, that anti-inflammatory, it allows the body the ability to adapt, and that's what it creates. And another way to say it is that when I have dopamine, I'm extremely focused. The negative side of that focus, or another way to focus the body, would be adrenaline. Norepinephrine,
Sure.
Poof, extremely focused. One is positively focused. One is, I got to get out of jail focused. But the other side of that is, I see all the options. That would be a serotonin-rich environment. And I find that when we take Biz-Demoxycurcumin Power Kirk, it actually immediately drops the stress down, and so that the dopamine activities in the body start to come up, and I see the options. The same thing happens when you have a fascial maneuver and you do it. Now, when you add the two together, you have space and time. It is, A lot of people are taking it for disease. A lot of people, athletes, take it for recovery. But the truth of it is like for me, I use these supplements in conjunction with the maneuvers for performance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's how it started for me.
Yeah.
Originally, my dive into curcumin, it was so long ago that curcumin wasn't even around. It was hard to find.
Sure.
And that was in 1990, 1989. I mean, historically, it's been around a long time in India, but in North America, we didn't see this in health food stores until around the 90s.
Right.
And I used it to help recover from performance, like from training. I mean, we were squatting 700 pounds at the time, 7 plates, or just something stupid. And, 550-pound bench press, training 7 days a week, 8 if there was an 8th day. And I needed recovery support. But later on, and as you said, you evolve what you do based on personal need. I was sick in 1991, and I found that curcuminoid was helping take the edge off the disease that I didn't know I had.
Right.
And so then I began to study from that standpoint. But today, if I'm not taking it, it's become so much a part of my life that I feel like, I can't get up in the morning as smoothly as I do. I'm rickety. I put on weight faster. I don't react in the day the way I want to react to emotional impulse. And I can be pretty high strung. These people here can tell you, there's times when they come to, is everything okay in here? Yeah, everything's fine. My dog who comes with me to the office, he'll go to the other office when he sees things are ramping up a little bit. But if I don't take my ashwagandha and my curcumin, I can go off the rails. And as a mature man, I've learned to, pull back and control that, because as much as, that intensity has been something that has propelled me in life, it's also, it's that double-edged sword that takes you down in a sense of adversity.
So I've gone through that experience myself, and what I've found is to step into what the next biggest issue is in human health or recovery. It's basically water. If we go back, 75 years ago, we were taught that the body was 80% water. 30 years ago, when I studied it, when you and I started studying it around then, 30, 40 years ago, it was 70% water. Today, effectively, we're teaching in med school today that we're 60% water. And I've been on the path to reverse that. I mean, you haven't touched me since then, but feel it.
Very malleable.
Feel my ear.
Wow.
That's the same consistency as the 6-month-old baby. And what I found is I was taking the edge off with using anti-inflammatories and working out. But I wanted to I wanted to move past the edge. And what I found for myself personally is that as my water content, which is demonstrably different than the average person, I found that I have more space again. And so what we're seeing out there, and to put this in perspective, we have 4.5 million people online today. We have about 40 million people around the world doing this. We are getting about 1.5 million a month. We have doctors and practitioners which prescribe our program daily that people aren't even online. And what we have noticed, we get currently up to 1 million questions a month.
Wow.
Health questions.
Wow.
And we're starting to see them come in like a big research project in a way that I've never seen before. But what we can tell is that it's like a tsunami. There's a cascading series of issues coming at us. And what we've found is that because a lot of people can't even get our supplements, or your supplements, our supplements, because we're all over the world in 80 countries. But what we found is that when we get silica and the full 102 minerals in their body over a period of 3 to 6 months, most of their disease processes start to revert or change or go away. And we have now literally tens of thousands of people that have shown us medical evidence of disease reversal. And it just seems to reduce stress, mineralize the body, increase water.
That makes sense. The basics, right?
Yeah.
And the mineralization helps the body neutralize pH, both ends of the spectrum,
which is
not just alkaline and
which is the hardest thing for the body to manage.
100%.
I mean, that's where all the stress comes.
Pushes towards acidity, especially as it processes food, disease, environment, right? And so it's easy for the body to stay in that low pH state. When we say low pH, we're not talking about like pH 2, 3, 4. The body controls pH very meticulously.
Absolutely.
But micro changes affect the body in profound ways.
Profound ways. And this is what I say to people all the time. They're doing everything to manage their blood sugar and their pH and stuff like this. Put a blood sugar monitor on them, get them angry. All of a sudden, their blood sugar goes off and regulated. And it's like, until we can regulate our emotions, which is 100%. The reaction to the environment, we cannot regulate our health.
Yeah.
And this is why, using supplements like Power 30, using supplements like the Fascial Fuel.
For sure.
Which allow the body the ability to regulate the environment better, and then doing a fascial maneuver where we have more adaptability to the current stressors.
For sure.
And that's really where, and this is, back to your potential within. The potential is within us, and it's unlocking it. And this is where I know that you're driving towards. And this is why I've wanted to attach my wagon to yours for a long time, because you have a way of looking at the mechanics of the body differently than pharmacology, differently than scientists, differently than doctors. And yours is driven by something that is evidence-based, which is results. And I prefer results over peer-reviewed papers any day.
Well, the unfortunate thing, and I agree with you 100%. The unfortunate thing is that, as we move forward, we got to have a hybrid model where you are appeasing, this is my opinion. It's not necessarily everybody else's, but appeasing what is needed in terms of the science. So we do publish, peer-reviewed journals.
You are,
and
that is important. It is important.
Yeah, and I think it helps to create credibility, because the average public, as well as the average professional, is looking for that. The reality is, how's it working in real life? Well, that's the reality.
I feel, honestly, though, Franco, you can put this as a mark, and you can check out what I say in 36 months. 36 months from now, nobody's going to care about the science anymore. What they're going to care about is, does it work? And do I trust you? Did it work for you? And how many other people? But that's what's building your business too. Like, that is
a big part of it. Is there's science that supports what you do.
Yes.
But the bigger part of it is what I've seen is this movement that you're creating, where you're taking all these people with you to all these events who've had life-changing experiences.
Yeah.
And those are powerful drivers for building the business, right?
I mean, we got parents working with kids that have blastomas that are reversing them. We have autoimmune diseases that people are reversing themselves. We have tens of thousands of women between 55 and 67 coming out of menopause. I have a 65-year-old that's going to get pregnant, and after being in menopause for like 20 years. Now, we're not even pretending that we know the human body. And I want to go back and say something that because I'm not a scientist like you. I'm a scientist in a different way, but we pretend that we know the human body. And so the one thing that stuck me is, and you'll know this better, but we have like between 5 and 20,000 proteins per cell. And I could be wrong on the number, but that's about right. And so let's average it at 10, just for this example. Everything from thinking to blinking requires the use or exertion or the function of a protein. It makes it all happen.
Oh, it's thousands of a blink is made up of hundreds of thousands of protein reactions, right?
So
pathways that
So we have, let's just average it at 10,000 proteins per cell. We have 50 trillion cells, so we have 5 quintillion protein. We scientifically, I think, have only identified like 100,000 maybe.
Well, look, I agree. I know where you're going. Every scientist, like I did my doctoral work on NF-kappa B signaling, which is inflammatory signaling pathway.
Sure.
And when you do PhD work, usually it's myopic because you're focused.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was, my own obligation and duty to expand just because I wanted to know more about how it integrates holistically within the body. But any scientist that's done a PhD or MD, they realize in due time, the more you know, the more you know you don't know. It's just hard to explain so many aspects of the science that looks solid, and you look past that, and now you don't know why.
So let's extrapolate that into culture. It's like we legitimately know 100,000 of 5 quintillion. So it's time for us to from a scientific standpoint, to stop pretending that we know everything and to do what you're doing, to go back and experiment and test outside the boundaries again. And this is actually to edify what you're doing, because you're right. People look at that one signaling pathway, but they don't look at all of the other things, like even how does it affect you emotionally? What does it do to your relationships?
Yeah.
These are all things that are part of science, but are just not currently looked at. And I like the view that we don't know anything, because if we don't know anything, everything we have is discovering, and we're finding new things, and we're open to it. But there's a current driving to say the science is settled, we know everything about the human body, and we don't know shit.
No, we don't. We don't. And I know that when we talk about, and I had my own problems, when I was doing my doctorate at the university, because there's a narrative, and the narrative is something that you need to stay with. And I know medical practitioners fight also with.
Are you talking about that yet?
I haven't.
Because I mean, I know the backstory.
I haven't spoken openly about my
because what they were doing to you is they were trying to control you and put you in a box, and you were saying, but this doesn't make sense. There's a whole world out here.
Yeah, and we could go into the detail of that. I think that's another podcast because it's pretty expansive.
Yeah, I think I think that's something that people need to hear, because they need to hear the truth. We worship science, and the challenge is that science has become completely reductive.
Yeah, look. I come from the scientific roots because I came up that channel. So I do believe in that process, and I believe that the science is necessary.
I do too.
But what shouldn't happen is if someone is thinking outside the box, and archaeologists always run down this path because of things they find about human evolution. But if you find something that's different, it should not be squashed.
Okay, so
just to maintain the current narrative.
Here's one for you. Theory of evolution, right? So one of the most famous scientists in the theory of evolution was Darwin. Do you know what kind of scientist he was?
Not specifically, no.
He's a geologist.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. This is where I want people to realize this.
Yes.
He was not a biologist.
Yeah.
He knew nothing about the human body. He was a geologist. And, they study rocks. And then he wrote the theory that now is the fundamental standing point of modern biology. And this, again, it's time for us to just relook at it, and not even to pretend that we know. Let's just tear it apart, and let's do what you're doing. Let's experiment. Because I've had, since 2016 with you, I've been experimenting, and my view of fascia in the body has really changed. A lot of it had to do with the introduction of Power Kirk, because I couldn't explain why the body was healing in the way it was just by taking the supplement when I was doing therapy. It took a 2-hour therapy, and as soon as I added 2 tablets of Power Kirk 30 to the therapy, it took a 2-hour therapy down to 70 minutes therapy to perform the same result. Now that's from a therapeutic clinical standards, doing 5,000 appointments a month. That's a big deal.
Wow, yeah. Yeah, and and to speak to what you're saying with the Power Kirk, the genesis of that technology is not regular curcumin. That was a function of me probing desperately with curcumin to treat ulcerative colitis.
Which you had.
And that's what I had. Severe ulcerative colitis, which kind of debilitated me. In fact, it was the main reason why, after winning Mr. North America in 1992, I thought, if I keep pushing this envelope, something's going to break worse than it is. It's that, listen to the signal, do your thing. So I decided, okay, well, I stayed on with the weight training and the enthusiastic exercise, but my focus was more on understanding the 3 curcuminoids and how they were affecting my body. Because early on, what happened was I was receiving curcumin batches with different certificate of analyses for each.
Right.
And every one that had a little bit higher bis-dimethoxycurcumin concentration, which is one of the fractions, would deliver a noticeably different result for me. So I began to then isolate each of the curcuminoids. And so my company, Champion's Choice, which was a sports nutrition company that you may have known me for
No, I did
in
know
the
you for
90s.
that. Yeah.
It became
Used your product all the time.
exclusively a funding mechanism for the research because I became just enamored and more obsessive about trying to determine. And so we made some discoveries, and I furthermore made more discoveries as I progressed through my doctorate, to determine what the mechanism of activity for that shift in proportion was, and then to shift it further and optimize it. And that's what your Power Curc is made with, is this optimized patented curcumin that is not normal or typical of what's extracted for curcumin. And it works very quickly and works more profoundly on diseases that may be affected by this MSK1, which regular curcumin cannot inhibit. And that was my, I think, one of a pivotal discovery that changed the course for me to move into my doctorate with an aggressive program. And the reason was, hey, this is novel. How long have we been studying inflammation? There are many pharmaceutical companies out there studying the symptoms of disease and how to treat the symptoms. And suddenly now, I've found something that's new. Why didn't anybody find this? And it inspired me. And it kind of helped me understand what was working for me. And then I published those papers and began creating these products that now millions of people are experiencing the same thing I experienced. For me, it was like, what?
And this comes back to the core of who you are and who I am. It's the same thing. It's like when I discovered the Fascial Maneuvers, I'm like, how is it I'm the only guy to have figured this part out? And well, first of all, to observe that it worked, but then we're still trying to build a language as to why it works. And I think that's part of your scientific journey too. Like there's still stuff that we don't know. And there's still stuff that you don't even know about what you've already discovered. And that's the cool part.
For sure. Yeah.
And that's the cool part. That's why applying this and leaving it open and not saying the science is solved, we can start to extract new information and take this in a whole new way.
Yeah. So what we've done, and speaking to what you're saying, is as we find these discoveries downstream that we know are potential drug targets for the treatment of disease, we then begin to study upstream to the genome. And it takes a long time. Like one of these programs could take 3 to 5 years to find out how this signaling pathway leads upstream to the genome that might be affected by the environment that delivers the anomaly. So the objective for us is, okay, we found a way to support symptomatic treatment of the symptom. Let's go now see where the cause is.
Right.
That's how you're going to treat disease. Yeah. And I think, I hate to say this because for some people who are, in the study of drug pharmacology and drug targeting, emotion, and I'm saying this in controversial stuff, plays a massive role in how those genes are affected by cortisol, by adrenaline, by environmental factors that change. It's called epigenetics. Epigenetics is not just an influence by your food and environment. It's an influence by the way you think to affect methylation and acetylation of your genes.
I've just looked at this from a layman's point of view, and I'm going to say that all disease in my belief system is emotional, because even like a child who seems to be innocent, and what I've noticed, I'll give you an example. So 10,000 active patients, I tested about 3,000 children. No, actually, sorry, 3,000 families. So more about 5,000 to 6,000 children. And what I found is that in the subclinical work, the mother's lab test, however hard her kidneys or her liver or bladder was working, I found the children to be a mirror. And then when we changed the mother without doing any intervention on the children, I found that their lab work would change. So my observation is that the way that the emotions, because if you walk into a room and you're angry, everybody knows it. There is something that's happening that's signaling the human biology to adapt to that feeling of anger. And that is off-regulating us. And even with children, the diseases, the children are the victim of the parents. And same thing with animals. I've also found the animals have the same diseases as the owners, so do the children. And then that says a lot about how we look at epigenetics. It's the stressor that creates the adaptation of the gene or the mutation of the gene.
Well, it's not necessarily a mutation, but I know exactly what you're saying. So here's an interesting fact. Speaking to what you're saying, because this is true science. As the environment, as your food, as your mindset affects the DNA. It's not necessarily the gene directly, but the DNA and how the DNA unravels or is available for transcription, meaning it can activate or desensitize various genes. And so as some of the genes that we need become desensitized, we can become sick, or vice versa.
Correct.
In fact, it's quite common, it's known that tumor suppressors, which are actively killing cells that become cancerous, tumor suppressors, the gene can be silenced by these epigenetic activities.
Sure.
And the interesting thing is that the changes by the environment, food, and emotions to your DNA are passed down. Passed down to your progeny, to your kids. So, they say that it's that these changes are not necessarily passed down, just like mutations can be passed down. These mild epigenetic changes that you induce to your DNA based on how you think is passed down to your kids.
So if you want to expand on that, this is what I found. It's not the genetics, it's the emotional genetics. That's what I say. Like we have a family situation, a husband and a wife come in, they sit down at the kitchen table, they eat with their kids through the same emotional response. And the stimulus is they put food in, which fires all these hormones. And that cascading series of food, that chemical concoction, programs the biology to start thinking the same way as the parents, or reacting to stimulus the same way, because we eat the same food.
100%, yeah.
And that is more likely the passing of genetical disposition to me than anything else that I can see. And again, from a layman's point of view.
Yeah, so, I talk about it a lot in Potential Within, where, if you have the same diseases as your mother and father and the grandparents, everybody says, okay, well, there's a genetic component. Yeah. Sure there is. But you've also learned the same eating habits, lifestyle habits that are usually carried down.
That's what it is. That's really what it is.
Yeah, the influences on your genes are the same, and you do have the same genetic profile. So of course you're going to have a similar outcome. Yeah. But if you change the influence, it changes the outcome from the genes.
And so this coming back to, what is disease and what is healing, and healing implies that we're sick, but the disease itself is actually just saying, I need you to look over here. It's a body saying, I need your attention.
100%.
When you put attention on it, the pain tends to subside. And I demonstrate this for pain in people all the time. And so pay attention to it, whether it's physical, emotional, or perceptual. And then when I pay attention to it, in order for me to pay attention to it, if I'm distracted, it's hard for me to pay attention. And if I'm distracted by my work, by inflammatory processes, which are causing my brain not to be able to think or process, this is why taking my body out of stress over a long period of time and habituating a state of not being in stress seems to be the best way for the body to adapt to the environment. In other words, to remove the feelings of not being at ease, which is disease.
Yeah, 100%.
That's my way of describing it. And that was my own journey, because I had a lot of stuff going on in my body. Even when I left clinic 5 years ago, I was not healthy. When I came down here and saw you the first time, I was coming out of a lot of years of not being healthy. I was doing everything. I was taking all the supplements, doing all the treatments, but inside I was an emotional wreck. And as I start to unravel that and get my body out of stress long enough and remove the stressors, for me, we fasted for 44 days. We isolated ourselves for 2 years. Not many people could do that. But what I learned through that experience was that I can take my stress down through a supplement, like through Power Kirk or through Fascial Fuel or through Fascial Release. I can take my stress down through the way I think, the way I move, the way I breathe. I can take the stress down by eliminating the chemicals in my food. I can take the stress down by doing a fascial maneuver. And if I do that consistently over a day, then the average of that over time is what is affecting my general health.
Yeah. And dealing with it as a one-off, doing one thing while 10 other adverse activities are affecting you in a wrong way. You really got to look at your body and health holistically. Yeah, I'm going to take these supplements, but I've got to. If there's one thing in your life you're doing, then that's causing you harm, and you know it, you've got to get rid of it. And knowing it is itself putting stress on you, knowing that that is causing me harm, that behavior is causing me harm, and I'm doing nothing about it. For me, that is stressful.
Well, they say if you go back to religious texts, it's the sin. Like if I don't know I'm sinning, then there's a consequence. But if I know I'm sinning, or if I have a behavior that I don't like, and I don't even know it, but as soon as I'm aware of it, now I put judgment on it. Well, judgment is a perception,
for sure,
which drives an emotional
100%.
response.
It changes everything.
Changes the way that we react.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what I love about working with you is that you have the science, but you understand how that science impacts the performance of the human being, where most people that have the science behind the body have no idea how it impacts them emotionally.
Thanks, man.
And impacting emotionally and how it helps me perform or move through my life is what you've been doing. So your angle at science is experiential.
100%. Now it's all about, I'm at an age where I don't like to say the word anti-aging because it sounds too superfluous and weak, but I'm at an age where I'm going to try to slow the aging process. And so all the work, but here's the cool thing, all the work I did for performance, all the research, it's the same application. It's about creating metabolic efficiency. It doesn't matter what you're trying to accomplish.
So this is why after this tour, I've been saying publicly, I will never talk about healing the body ever again. I'm done. I've agreed to do this until May 18th of this coming year, and never will I talk about healing ever again. Because what I found is that people that want to heal are constantly in this loop of thinking they're broken and they need to heal. People who want to perform, healing becomes one thing that they do on the step to performance. And that's why even our language is changing. We're moving our language from, healing and transforming trauma to performing in the body, and what we've been doing is taking people on our journey, walking them out of the mess that they're in, and
optimizing biological performance. Right?
That's what it is. Because at the end of it,
bio-optimizing mind and body.
Yeah, I mean if we're doing that, then by default we're healing.
The body then adapts to your environment in a way that it's best suitable to succeed.
So we got to put this one in here, because what I've noticed, I'm going to say something because I'm going to a conference right away on biohacking. But what I've noticed is people who biohack over a long period of time, when I physically work with them, touch their body, look at them emotionally and stuff like this, I notice that their bodies are tight, they're agitated, they don't function that well. And what do you think about this whole idea of constantly putting more in the body? Because that's what biohacking is about. Yeah,
biohacking, I mean, there's different, I guess, personal opinions of what biohacking is, but you're bending the chemistry of the body by biohacking, by the very nature of the definition. So, and how accurately can you be bending that chemistry? We humans, how do you know that you're bending it in the right direction?
Well, that's the point. I've noticed that the biohackers that I've been working with over the years are starting to have less function and do more to maintain themselves. That's what I'm noticing.
Yeah, it's focusing in one area, usually focusing in one area where they have deficiency. And, what we're trying to do, and I talk about this all the time, what we do is really biohacking, but it's upstream at the genetic level where we're trying to say to the body, fix yourself. Well, you can't fix the body.
You're right. At the core of it, you're actually doing something that others aren't. You're not. The products that you produce are enabling the body to function at a greater level, and your belief is that when the body moves and functions, it performs and heals.
Exactly.
And that this is different.
Giving your body the window of opportunity to do its job.
That's exactly okay. This is where you and I agree, and this is why, like I said, years ago, I want the world to understand or to experience what the science that you brought. I said that to you in 2017 because I realized that what you weren't doing is you weren't taking away a function of the body or a function of supporting the body, which most pharmacology does, or even nutraceuticals. You are looking at how does the body optimize its current function.
Yeah, and to speak to that specifically, and we don't want to push this along too long. I know you're going out for another podcast shortly. We look at what the body does naturally, the myokines that I was telling you earlier
Right.
about. What does the body do naturally to adapt and restore and recover the metabolism and general insulin function? What does it do? What are the chemicals it's secreting? And then we go in and say, okay, we don't want to change that. How do we prompt that muscle to secrete that chemical again, whether you're working out or not? What is the upstream genomic signal that we need to ping to do that, so that we synergize what you would do with exercise, not to eliminate exercise,
Right.
because there's things that exercise does that we don't even know about today that, optimize the body and the mind. So, we're not trying to change how the body works. We're trying to take advantage, if you will, of what the body does to restore and heal, and then nudge it along and get it to push that along.
I mean, that's back to the origin of your belief system. You came to science through experiential. I mean, you were validating your own experiences, which is different than studying something that you have no experience with personally.
And there's a different passion all about it. Like
Absolutely.
the intensity with which you approach that is very different than, a topical study of, a doctoral thesis.
Well, if I want to learn from somebody, I learn from somebody who has an experience. And that's what I found in my life. For me to be successful is to take somebody who has an experience in something, not somebody who's thought about it, talked about it, written about it, studied it. Somebody who's solved an experience or had an experience in their life can convey that, because they're conveying the emotion. And
It's
the
not coming
emotion-
from here.
Right.
It's coming from here.
Right.
Yeah.
And then my brain will develop its own truth on that emotion.
100%.
And
yeah.
that's really what I like about what you're doing, because it is emotional. It is something that you believe in, and you didn't go to school to study this to work in the field. You went to school to try to help understand what you were already getting.
100%.
and achieving.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and the same with you. I got to say, like, I'm just, with Mike, these guys are unbelievable. The way you guys have evolved so quickly. And it's because you believe.
Yeah.
You
It's all belief.
thoroughly believe in what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that's contagious.
Yeah.
As opposed to, selling someone on a concept up here, you're selling them on a concept where you believe that this is beneficial for mankind, and it's good on you. So November 9th, where are you? In Miami, right?
We're in Miami. We're at the Content Creator House with Gary Brecka's going to be there.
Wow.
And I'm going to be doing some sort of talk with him. But what we're doing is, these are all the top biohackers coming together. There's about $2.5 million worth of equipment on site. And what we're going to be doing for the first time ever is showing the performance side of Fascial Maneuvers.
Oh, great.
And so we're going to be taking people from in the morning through that performance side, which I'm super excited about. Because the focus, or the attribute that we focus Fascial Maneuvers on, is trauma or healing. But there's a whole other, it's sometimes similar things you do, but for a different reason. And I want people to see where this was born. This was born in making Olympic athletes run faster.
Wow.
And I want people to see that.
Good for you, man. That's awesome. I'm proud of you, man. Good job. Thanks for coming to Potential Within. I hope we can do these more frequently.
I think we should.
And
I think it's time to blow up the scientific discussion.
For sure.
And put some heart back.
And like we've talked about, doing some research work together. I mean, we've got a full-blown drug lab downstairs.
And I got people all over the world. I got test subjects all over the world.
Yeah, we can work with that. That's great. All right, thanks for coming.
Looking forward to this.
All right, take care.
Okay.